Bokassa, in front of Gaddafi, converted to Islam. He took the name Salah ad-Din Ahmed Bokassa. As a show of good faith, Gaddafi signed agreements that instantly transferred money into Central Africa's coffers.
Many in Bokassa, the dictator's lead, had converted. However, some refused. One of those who refused was former President David Dacko. By now, Dacko had been let out of prison and appointed as an advisor. He believed that the conversion to Islam was a betrayal to his Catholic Baka people.
But Bokassa had no interest in actually following Islam, nor did he actually intend to change the government to reflect Gaddafi's philosophy. His actions were all a political ploy.
Bokassa did intend on changing his government, but not how anyone imagined. A few days after Gaddafi left Bangui, Bokassa sent his cousin David Dacko to Paris with a message. He would break ties with Libya and renounce Islam if the French government would recognize him as emperor. And he wanted France to pay for most of the ceremony.
You don't like that?
France
No, I feel like it should be.
yes.
I mean, I don't understand this type of guys doing it.
The announcement that Bokassa was to be crowned emperor seemed to come out of nowhere. In reality, he had quietly been considering it since taking power. Bokassa admired the few remaining emperors of the 20th century, including Haile Selassie in Ethiopia, the only emperor in Africa.
Ashley
But
beats
2
him.
years earlier, in 1974, Emperor Selassie had been overthrown. The turmoil saddened Bokassa and made him think that perhaps he should be Africa's new reigning monarch.
But instead of crafting his own identity, Bokassa turned once again to the French for inspiration. He wanted his empire to be modeled after a man he grew up admiring, Napoleon Bonaparte.
In the past, Bokassa hinted to Giscard about turning the country into an empire with a royal Napoleonic ceremony. Giscard brushed off the idea. It would be foolish to hold such a lavish coronation, considering the poor state of the economy.
That is, until Bokassa started meeting with Gaddafi. Now, France was scrambling to keep him on their side. It was cheaper to pay for a coronation than lose their economic interests to Libya. So, on December 4th, 1976, the Central African Empire was born.
With the new empire came a confusing reorganization of the government. One of the more confusing aspects was that Bokassa created an imperial cabinet to coincide with Prime Minister Ange Félix Patissé's cabinet. And this new imperial cabinet, located in Bokassa's palace, would often override the Prime Minister.
Historian Brian Titley writes, the idea behind the two cabinets was apparently to enable the emperor to wield real power while giving himself a scapegoat if things went wrong. The prime minister could always be held responsible for the many ills of the country.
In essence, Bokassa wanted the title and power of emperor without the responsibilities or consequence.
So while Prime Minister Patissé attempted to run the government, Bokassa focused his attention on the royal coronation. The theme was Napoleon Bonaparte's 1804 coronation. From the attire that he and his guards wore to the music that was played, all of it was to emulate the crowning of the historical Emperor of France.
But there was one notable missing element. Pope Paul VI. Like Napoleon, Bokassa wanted the Pope himself to place the $2.5 million crown on his head in the cathedral in Bangui, which was fittingly called Notre Dame.
However, the Vatican declined. They said the Pope was too old to travel, and that popes in general no longer crowned kings or emperors. The best they offered was sending a representative and performing a mass after the ceremony.
While not entirely pleased, Bokassa took what he could get. All that truly mattered was that the day went flawlessly, and he had his crown and scepter.
On December 4th, 1977, in front of 4,000 people, 56 6-year-old Jean Bedel Bokassa was officially crowned Emperor Bokassa I. Standing in front of a golden eagle, dressed in a toga and velvet cloak, Bokassa swore his oath to the people.
He would call this moment the greatest victory ever won by the Central African people.
But the victory was hollow. No major head of state attended the event. Neither Idi Amin nor Mobutu Sese Seko, supposed friends of Bokassa's, were in attendance, and neither was the French president, Giscard.
Instead, the international community found the entire ceremony a joke. The newspapers ridiculed Bokassa for how audacious and over-the-top the whole affair was, and more importantly, how expensive it was.
I always say they
The
don't make
bill
it
that France paid was estimated to equal about $20 million, or $80 million today, making it one of the most expensive coronations in history.
However, one of the French representatives defended the ceremony. He suggested that much of the criticism was due to racism. He pointed out that everyone was quick to criticize Bokassa's lack of austerity, but not Queen Elizabeth's during her silver jubilee, which took place that very same year.
Whatever criticisms Bokassa read in the papers were of no concern to him. He was now emperor, and in the days following November 4th, 1977, Bokassa relished living a royal life in his palace, about 50 miles from Bangui.
But while the world's leaders refused to take Emperor Bokassa seriously, a faction of the Central African community saw the coronation as a breaking point. But it wasn't the military or members within the cabinet who were most incensed. It was the nation's students.
For years, Bokassa and the students of Central Africa had a contentious relationship, not unlike the one Bokassa had with France. He didn't ban education like Francisco Macias Nguema. Rather, he censored discourse on Western politics and human rights.
But the change came too late. When the empire was announced, many of the older students realized how dangerous the situation was becoming and began protesting. Bokassa knew he needed to silence these students before they started considering a coup.
Inspired by a recent visit to China, Bokassa ordered that all students must wear uniforms to school. The idea was to force them to conform and usher in a more militant approach to education.
Unfortunately, in 1978, the economy was once again in the tanks. Inflation was through the roof. Civil servants weren't getting paid, and the families simply couldn't afford the uniforms. So when classes started, only a handful of students showed up properly dressed.
Things came to a head in January 1979. Schools in Bangui barred students from entering the classroom if not wearing a uniform. It was a tipping point the students had been waiting for. There was no reason they should be denied an education just because Bokassa had mismanaged the economy.
On January 19th, roughly 3,000 students between the ages of 14 and 25 took to the streets of Bangui demanding that their parents be paid. Days before the demonstrations, the Shah of Iran had been forced out of office. In Bangui, the students began shouting, "After the Shah, Bokassa."
In response, Bokassa sent the military to help the police break up the protests, and violence erupted well into the night. When the smoke finally cleared, an unknown number of people were dead. Bokassa had regained control of the city.
When word of the protests reached France, President Giscard offered to help Bokassa with a loan. Bokassa readily accepted it, and for once, didn't siphon it all for himself. Instead, he actually used it to pay the teachers, civil servants, and soldiers what they were owed. He hoped that the students' parents now paid, the disobedience would end.
But the January protests, which started spontaneously, ignited a revolution. For the next few months, resistance organizations secretly began cropping up around the city. Throughout March and April, rallies and strikes erupted with one demand: the end of Bokassa.
Bokassa became increasingly annoyed. No matter how many teachers he arrested, the rallies continued and grew in number. And when one rally in mid-April resulted in mass arrests by the military, Bokassa had reached his tipping point.
At midnight on April 18th, Bokassa ordered the military to round up students of all ages in Bangui. For hours, soldiers swept through the streets, going door to door and arresting children. For those who weren't able to flee to the neighboring Republic of Zaire, it was off to Garagba prison.
For the next 12 hours or so, these children were tortured, many of them beaten to death. Some witnesses would later claim that Bokassa himself partook in the torture, using his ivory cane to beat the children.
When the parents demanded answers, the government denied that the arrests even took place. Eventually, they admitted that less than 50 students had been arrested, 18 had died.
But Bokassa knew that the arrests painted him in a horrible light. So on April 20th, he declared himself the father and protector of all children, and ordered that it was now illegal to arrest and imprison the youth.
The next day, April 21st, the surviving students were released, with a lethal warning that if they acted up again, they would never see freedom.
Bokassa was convinced that his firm response would be enough to suppress any more dissent from the students. But he couldn't have been more wrong.
Coming up, the downfall of an empire. Now back to the story.
From January through April 1979, students throughout the Central African Empire protested the rule of Emperor Jean-Fidel Bokassa. After arresting, torturing, and murdering some of the students, Bokassa hoped that his firm hand would put an end to the dissent. Instead, it was the beginning of his end for his empire.
Within weeks of the April arrests, disturbing reports spread to Europe of violence against children in the Central African Empire. In London, witnesses testified on the atrocities before Amnesty International.
On May 14th, the organization published a report of what they'd learned. All throughout Europe, calls rang out for an investigation into the massacres.
Bokassa downplayed the report. He claimed the French press was blowing everything out of proportion.
I think he free spaghetti straps. Because I was never like, it was like spaghetti straps.
But for himself. So he called for the creation of an investigative commission. Bokassa only agreed to cooperate after Giscard threatened to cut off French aid.
But that didn't mean he had to be entirely truthful. During interviews with the investigative commission and the press, Bokassa continued his campaign of denial. He proclaimed that Amnesty International had exaggerated the situation. He went so far as to blame an unnamed French ex-wife of his as the mastermind of the whole thing.
But as the investigation continued, the mood in the empire was changing. Bokassa began to sense that something was amiss. His relationship with the French and members of his own cabinet was suspicious. By July, Bokassa was paranoid that a coup was afoot.
He wasn't wrong. Many within Bokassa's government realized the gravity of the situation. The possibility of serious blowback became more apparent each day. They knew they needed to distance themselves from the emperor.
One of those concerned men was none other than the former president, David Dacko. In the middle of July, Dacko defected to France with the intention of overthrowing his cousin, claiming that a full-scale revolution was on the horizon. Unfortunately, the French government wasn't buying it. They refused to help Dacko. However, they allowed him to stay in the country for his own safety.
Daco's defection angered Bokassa, but he saw it as more of an annoyance than a real threat. His empire would remain intact.
Unfortunately, such peace of mind only lasted a few weeks. At the end of July, the final report by the French Commission was about to be released, and it didn't look good for Bokassa.
On August 1st, Bokassa discovered that his friend Giscard was demanding that he step down. The report directly implicated Bokassa in the massacres, including his direct participation in the torturing of children.
But Bokassa refused. He would not abdicate, nor would he accept the offer of living peacefully in France. If they wanted him off the throne, they would have to take it from him.
France decided to do just that.
In the middle of August, the Commission's report was released and sparked the outrage everyone was expecting. Within days, France cut all economic aid to the empire that was not related to humanitarian projects like health or education.
At the same time, the French military drafted up plans to invade the Central African Empire. Known as Operation Barracuda, the plan was to peacefully topple Bokassa and install a successor.
The French ultimately decided to reinstate David Daco as president. But Daco wasn't too keen on the idea. Yes, he wanted his cousin deposed, but Daco feared Bokassa's revenge. But when the French met with Daco, he reluctantly agreed, mostly because he was strapped for cash, and being president would afford him the chance to fill his pockets.
France made the invasion known to neighboring leaders in Africa, and all of them, former friends of Bokassa, agreed not to intervene. They too had grown tired of the emperor.
Bokassa, meanwhile, was busy trying to keep the nation from going bankrupt. With French aid gone, Bokassa was unable to pay his soldiers and civil servants. He knew he needed to do something without giving up his own personal fortune, and he needed to do it quickly. He decided to suck up his pride and once more ask Muammar Gaddafi for help.
Gaddafi was all too happy to forgive Bokassa for his betrayal in 1976, mainly because the empire had things Gaddafi wanted. In exchange for aid, Gaddafi wanted access to Central Africa's uranium deposits and control of a strategic military base.
Bokassa accepted right away. And to formalize the deal, he would go to Tripoli and meet with the Libyan dictator on September 19, 1979.
On September 20th, Bokassa sat down with Gaddafi and hammered out the details of their arrangement. By the time their meeting ended in the late evening hours, Bokassa had the funds to pay his soldiers. He went to bed feeling great about the lucrative new deal.
But he was suddenly awakened at 2:30 a.m. to distressing news. David Daco, backed by French commandos, had seized the capital. In the hours that followed, Bokassa discovered the extent of the treachery.
The French had been closely monitoring Bokassa's movements thanks to the Prime Minister, who was poised to be named Vice President under Daco. When Bokassa left for Libya, the Prime Minister telephoned Paris, and Operation Barracuda was a go.
Along with over 100 of France's most elite paratroopers, Daco was flown into Bangui and seized control of the capital. The empire's military, still untrained and ill-equipped, immediately threw down their weapons at the sight of the French commanders.
The empire had fallen without a single bullet fired.
But Bokassa wasn't going to let the coup stand. Within hours, he formulated a plan to fly to one of his mansions in France and plan a counter-coup. Unfortunately for him, France wouldn't accept him. After landing in France, Bokassa was told he wasn't allowed to disembark the plane.
In the days that followed, while trapped aboard the plane, he learned through radio messages that no country would accept him, not even Libya. When he asked if he could return to Central Africa and live the rest of his days as a farmer, David Dacko denied the request.
Finally, on September 24th, after spending nearly 3 full days trapped on the tarmac in France, Bokassa got word that the Ivory Coast would accept the deposed emperor. The request came from Giscard, and the condition was that Bokassa could live freely in a mansion, so long as he didn't engage in politics.
Bokassa had no other option but to accept.
In the days that followed, Bokassa's imperial mansion was raided, and an untold amount of money and jewelry was confiscated. Political scientist Samuel Decala reports that an estimated $125 million was discovered. The mansions Bokassa held throughout Europe were all confiscated as well.
But the most shocking discovery during these raids were mutilated cadavers in Bokassa's refrigerator. The bodies sparked the rumors that Bokassa was a cannibal. David Dacko added fuel to that fire when he told the press that not only did Bokassa eat humans, but he fed them to foreign dignitaries.
The French press ate up the cannibalism claims. This, with the discovery of mass graves at Ngarambe prison and bones inside lion and crocodile pits, called for Bokassa to be tried for crimes against humanity.
But Dacko didn't attempt to extradite his cousin for a trial. Instead, his focus was on moving past the reign of Bokassa and turning the country in a new direction.
So Bokassa remained relatively free in the Ivory Coast, living amongst the people and dining in high-end bars. For entertainment, he watched as his weak cousin was once again overthrown by the military in September 1981.
The bloodless coup by General André Kalimba gave Bokassa an idea. If he was Napoleon, then the Ivory Coast was his Elba. He still had a chance to reclaim his kingdom.
Bokassa waited to make his move. He eventually left the Ivory Coast and was granted permission to live in France until a more permanent country would take him. But after 5 years of waiting, he was finally ready to return home.
On October 23rd, 1986, Bokassa quietly snuck out of France and flew to Bangui. The moment he stepped foot in the airport, a sense of unease came over him. He had expected a hero's welcome, but no one seemed to give him a second glance.
Then, as he walked through the terminal, someone shouted, "The boss is back!" Soon a crowd of former supporters gathered around him, cheering with joy.
But within 90 minutes of his landing, word had reached the authorities and Bokassa was arrested by French military units. He was locked away in a military camp.
Bokassa claimed that he wasn't there to overthrow Kalimba, but rather to clear his name, especially the slanderous rumors of cannibalism. So Kalimba decided that the best way to rid the nation of its demons was to have a public trial.
Bokassa's trial began on December 15, 1986, and it was the media circus that everyone had anticipated. Bokassa faced 14 various charges, including murder, embezzlement, and cannibalism. And he denied every single one, blaming overzealous officers instead.
Cannibalism was the charge everyone looked forward to during the trial. For years, the rumors of Bokassa's eating habits had been a specter over the country.
Unfortunately, it became painfully obvious that the cannibalism was a smear tactic. Witness testimony fell apart during cross-examination. David Dacko backtracked his earlier claims. Even the French press believed the charge wouldn't stand.
In fact, when the trial finally ended in June, cannibalism was one of the few charges of which the court found Bokassa not guilty. The rest, however, were guilty convictions.
Initially, Bokassa was sentenced to death by firing squad, but President Kalimba agreed to commute the sentence to life in prison, most likely in an attempt to avoid violence from Bokassa supporters.
In September 1993, Kalimba announced that he was granting amnesty to all of the country's prisoners. After serving only 7 years, the 72-year-old Bokassa was a free man.
In his final years, although he walked around in his martial uniform and used imperial letterheads, Bokassa never made another attempt for power. Instead, he lived in relative poverty at a small villa, relying on gifts from family members to survive.
On November 3, 1996, the 75-year-old dictator died of a heart attack. By now, no one uttered his name nor gave him a passing glance. The glory he had spent decades trying to achieve had all but faded. His name was a footnote in history.
Jean Bedel Bokassa's sole mission in life was to be honored at the highest level. He wanted to replicate a Napoleon-style empire with himself at the top, to create a monarchy in Africa like those in Europe.
To that end, his rule was more about acquiring personal glory than bloodthirsty totalitarianism. Unlike Idi Amin or Francisco Macias Nguema, Bokassa didn't commit genocide. With political imprisonments and suppression of dissidents, the number of dead during his 14 years as dictator comes to around 500.
But like Amin and Nguema, Bokassa's reign set the stage for his country's future of upheaval and chaos. To this day, Central Africa has suffered various coups and civil wars.
All three of these post-colonial African dictators share something in common. Their sole goal of achieving personal power meant that the people were going to suffer. Programs and institutions that should have been put into place at the beginning of independence weren't.
More damning is the fact that European powers were the impetus for these dictators to take control. France and Britain had working relationships with Bokassa and Amin, respectively, and Spanish businessmen helped prop up Nguema for their own gain. In the end, more than half a century later, the consequences of colonialism still echo in Africa.
Thanks for listening to Dictators. Next week, we begin our new season and head to South America. We'll dive into 3 dictators who came out of the United States Operation Condor: Jorge Rafael Videla, Augusto Pinochet, and Alfredo Stroessner.
For more information, among the many sources we used, we found Brian Titley's Dark Age, The Political Odyssey of Emperor Bokassa, especially helpful.
You can find all episodes of Dictators and all other podcast originals for free on Spotify.
Not only does Spotify already have all of your favorite music, but now Spotify is making it easy for you to enjoy all of your favorite podcast originals like Dictators for free from your phone, desktop, or smart speaker.
To stream Dictators on Spotify, just open the app and type Dictators in the search bar.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Parcast and Twitter at Parcast Network. We'll see you next time.
Dictators was created by Max Cutler and is a Parcast Studios original. It is executive produced by Max Cutler, sound design by Brian Gollum, with production assistance by Ron Shapiro, Carly Madden, and Travis Clark. This episode of Dictators was written by Joe Guerra, writing assistance by Kate Gallagher, and stars Kate Leonard and Richard Rossman.
Due to the graphic nature of this episode, listener discretion is advised. This episode contains discussion of torture that some people may find offensive. We advise extreme caution for children under 13.
South America in the 1970s was a crucible of conflict and upheaval. Since gaining independence from Spain in
This is one of
1800s, the various
the
countries had been ruled by a group of bourgeois landowners. But after World War II, the citizens began to clamor for workers' and voters' rights.
Many South Americans saw the Cuban Revolution of the 1950s, led by Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, as a template for their own destiny. The ideals of Marxism-Leninism took root. Left-wing workers and students battled conservative landowners and businesses. The continent teetered on the edge of anarchy, alarming their watchful neighbor to the north, the United States.
The U.S. was already in the midst of its own global campaign to crush Marxism. Now fearing a communist takeover on their southern doorstep, the U.S. decided it needed to intervene.
With both public and covert help from the U.S., South American generals staged violent coups, seizing power. But what resulted was something perhaps more devastating and oppressive than communism: military dictatorships.
Welcome to Dictators, a podcast original. I'm Richard.
And I'm Kate. You can find all episodes of Dictators and all other podcast originals for free on Spotify. To stream Dictators for free on Spotify, just open the app and type Dictators in the search bar.
This season, we're traveling down to South America, where we'll explore the brutal military reigns of Jorge Rafael Videla of Argentina, Augusto Pinochet of Chile, and Alfredo Stroessner of Paraguay.
With the covert backing of the United States, these three dictators came to power through military coups. And once in control, they worked together to suppress Marxist revolutionaries in a deadly campaign of terror known as Operation Condor.
Today, we'll kick off this deep dive into the Southern Hemisphere with the rise to power of General Jorge Rafael Videla of Argentina. After 30 years as a military officer, Videla led a coup against the disastrous President Isabel Perón. He named himself president and waged a brutal war against political opponents and everyday citizens alike.
Next week, we'll chronicle Videla's 5 years in power, including his sanctioning of torture, kidnapping, and murder of political dissidents. By the time Videla stepped down, close to 30,000 citizens were missing or dead. We'll examine General Videla's reign of terror right after this.
Jorge Rafael Videla is a name that few people around the world recognize. But in Argentina, he is synonymous with death, terror, and the desaparecidos, a term used by Argentines to describe the citizens who disappeared without a trace during his years in power.
From 1976 to 1981, it's estimated that 30,000 people went missing, including students, union organizers, and political dissidents. These men and women are all presumed dead, and all at the hands of secret military units sanctioned by Videla.
To achieve his goals, he employed concentration camps, black markets, stolen children, and murder. Videla said at one point, if the Argentine situation demands it, all necessary persons must die to achieve the security of the country.
But he didn't do it alone. Videla's regime was part of a covert intelligence alliance with 5 other South American countries. Known as Operation Condor, these countries worked together to suppress any and all leftist political agitation. And it was all backed by the United States.
But Videla didn't have ambitions to be a brutal dictator, nor even a political leader. Like the other South American dictators, he wanted to spend his career in the military.
I don't think so.
In the city of Mercedes, Argentina, Jorge Rafael Videla was born on August 2, 1925. He hailed from a family of well-respected military officers. His father was a decorated army colonel, and his great-great-grandfather fought against the British invaders in the early 1800s.
In Argentina, the military had a proud lineage. They were credited with leading the country to independence from Spain. As a result, army officers were seen as a respected class. Not quite on the par with the nation's bourgeois landowners, but not far off.
So it was in that proud tradition that Videla grew up, hoping to follow in his family's footsteps of discipline, honor, and protection of the country.
That day finally came on March 3rd, 1942. 16-year-old Videla, accompanied by his father, arrived at the granite archway of Argentina's National Military Academy.
Videla was intimidated by the sprawling school outside the nation's capital of Buenos Aires, and watching the muscular military cadets march by, Videla grew apprehensive.
Despite being tall for his age, Videla was thin and reedy with a narrow face like a greyhound. He was probably the thinnest of the bunch. He wondered if he could just return to San Luis and become a businessman or a local government official.
Videla's father sensed his son's unease. He grabbed him by his bony shoulders and assured him that there is more to being a soldier than brawn and muscles. The military, the country, needed men with brains and cunning. They needed him.
Videla stood up straight. His father was right. Armed with that advice, he crossed through the granite archway, ready to serve Argentina.
Just 2 years later, in 1944, Videla graduated near the top of his class, though more for his intelligence than his ability to carry heavy packs on the obstacle course. Straight out of the academy, he went to work in the infantry as a junior officer. Once there, he distinguished himself as a professionalist, a career military man committed to the security of his country. He quickly learned that regardless of the political party in power, it was up to the military to protect the people.
In the early 1960s, Videla returned to his alma mater, the National Military Academy, and found his calling as an instructor. He loved teaching. He could fulfill his mission of protecting his country by training future generations of soldiers.
For nearly a decade, he excelled in education, and it didn't go unnoticed. After some time, the military leadership promoted him to director of the academy. Just like his father had assured him years before, his cunning and intellect had taken him far in the army. And every day, he was proving himself valuable to his country.
In the summer of 1964, Videla was selected to attend the U.S. Army's School of the Americas in Panama. The School of the Americas was an elite military training ground run by the Pentagon, with occasional assistance from the CIA. There, Videla and other military leaders from South America learned U.S. military tactics and counterinsurgency strategies with the goal of fighting communist guerrillas.
But perhaps most importantly, they received a crash course in the U.S.'s intelligence and espionage techniques, including torture and interrogation tactics from the CIA. These techniques laid the foundation for Argentina and its neighboring countries' own national spy agencies in the 1960s and 70s.
For Videla, the education at the School of Americas was valuable, but he didn't subscribe to the anti-communist politics of the program. To him, the military was independent. It defended the country against all enemies, foreign and domestic, communist and conservative.
Argentina had plenty of Marxist-Leninist revolutionaries, but there was also terrorism from ultranational anti-communist forces as well. Whoever presented the gravest threat was who Videla would call his enemy, if and when the time came to take up arms.
In the meantime, Videla returned to the National Military Academy to continue teaching. There he remained an independent professionalist as he had always intended.
He taught his students duty and honor and avoided taking sides in the war between right-wing and left-wing politics. For the 39-year-old Videla, he was content to finish out his military career in the relative peace and quiet of the academy.
Unfortunately, during the late 1960s, Argentina was far from peace. Like many South American countries, Marxism suddenly swept through the country. Discontented workers organized unions and clamored for benefits, and radical revolutionary groups turned to kidnappings, bombings, and assassinations.
Throughout Argentina's history, the country had always turned to the military to restore order, usually in the form of military coups. These coups were often bloody and hard-fought, but Argentines came to rely on them as a periodic reset switch for their dysfunctional government.
During the 1960s alone, Videla witnessed 2 such coups, and in both cases, they involved one of the most famous and polarizing names in Argentine politics, Juan Perón.
Juan Perón had come to power in the 1940s by popularizing workers' rights, but he was a controversial figure. He granted amnesty to Nazi war criminals, and he imprisoned anyone who criticized him for it.
In 1955, Perón was deposed and sent into exile in Spain, but he continued to meddle in Argentina's politics. In 1962, he orchestrated the election of a puppet president. A military coup quickly intervened and banned Perón's candidates from running for election. But that policy caused its own conflicts, and another coup occurred in 1966.
Then, in 1973, Perón returned to Argentina with the help of a new puppet administration. And after secretly courting the support of both far-right and far-left insurgents, he regained the presidency. Back in power, he undertook a brutal regime that encouraged violence from his supporters on both the right and the left. This led to a confusing and violent period in Argentina. Bombings and assassinations were regularly carried out by both factions.
While death was literally everywhere, only one truly rocked the country, and it didn't come from an assassin's bullet. On July 1st, 1974, Perón died suddenly of a heart attack. This left the presidency to his third wife, Isabel, a former burlesque dancer who served as both First Lady and Vice President.
President Isabel Perón inherited the disarray of her husband's regime, and she only succeeded in bringing it closer to civil war. Considered by many to be an unfit leader, she seemed to care more about fashion and tarot cards than the welfare of Argentines. One of her main advisors, a man named José López Rega, was obsessed with the occult, and also allegedly controlled an anti-communist death squad called the AAA. On Rega's advice, Perón ordered the military to be purged of any anti-Peronists.
Throughout his career, Videla had remained politically neutral, including during Juan Perón's power grabs, so he assumed he was safe. He knew it was unwise to choose sides. As soon as the other side came to power, which seemed historically inevitable, the other party was pushed out or killed.
But on July 16, 1975, Videla arrived at the military academy and learned the shocking news. Isabel Perón was casting him out of the army.
Videla learned from his colleagues that it was retaliation for an investigation Videla had been assigned years before. As part of an army tribunal, he had investigated Rega's AAA death squad, one of Videla's few seemingly partisan actions.
Videla, who was normally an even-tempered man, exploded. The army was his home. He dedicated his life to it, and now he was being unceremoniously cut loose after 30 years of service.
But he tried to look on the bright side. At least he wasn't killed like many people he knew. He would move his wife and 7 children back to his home province of San Luis. Maybe he would run for local politics like his grandfather.
But a month later, in August 1975, Videla received an unexpected phone call. His presence was demanded at the Casa Rosada, the home and office of the president. When Videla arrived the next day, Isabel asked him to become the commander-in-chief of the Argentine Armed Forces.
Videla was shocked. It was a huge honor, nearly equivalent to a cabinet position. But barely a month earlier, Isabel had wanted him banished from the military. Why the sudden change of heart?
She tried to explain that it was simply a misunderstanding, but Videla discovered later that she had been pressured by other military heavyweights who respected him as a career soldier.
While Isabel spoke, Videla took note of her erratic behavior and refusal to take off her stylish, oversized sunglasses. He had heard rumors about her cocaine use and wondered if she was hiding red, nervous eyes.
Videla weighed his options. He could walk away and risk being killed by a vengeful president anyway.
Or he could become Peron's commander-in-chief, where he might be able to make a difference and defend his country from this bad boy.
Either way, it was a risk. Videla knew that by accepting the position, he would forever be branded a Peronist. As soon as the next government took over, he would be purged, probably killed.
But as a soldier, he had always accepted the risk of death. Now he was putting it on the line once again in defense of his country. And as his father had advised him before, his country needed him.
After a moment, Videla shook Peron's hand and accepted her offer. And with that, Videla stepped into the center stage of national politics for the first time. It was a choice that would shape his country's history more than he could possibly imagine.
Coming up, General Videla struggles to remain neutral under Isabel Peron. Now, back to the story.
In August 1975, 50-year-old General Jorge Rafael Videla became Argentina's commander-in-chief of the armed forces. It was a departure for Videla, the first time that he had allied himself directly with a president or a political party.
But it was for good reason. Even though the country had been in trouble for many years, now under Isabel Peron, Argentina was in the midst of a full-blown crisis.
The country's politics bordered on anarchy. On one side, Marxist-Leninist guerrilla forces frequently staged strikes, kidnappings, and bombings.
And on the opposite side, state-sanctioned anti-communist death squads roamed the country, killing demonstrators, politicians, and labor leaders. In the first year of Isabel's presidency, there had been 503 political assassinations.
Meanwhile, years of the Peron's pro-worker regime had driven away companies and manufacturing, leaving Argentina's economy in shambles. There was rampant unemployment. People were starving. Oil prices tripled. Inflation was estimated to be 1,000%.
But instead of leading the country out of this morass, Isabel isolated herself in the Casa Rosada. She claimed that she was too ill to meet with political leaders. Cabinet members became so exhausted that some resigned, while others fled the country.
The rapid breakdown in Argentina especially concerned the United States. With Peron vulnerable, the last thing they wanted was a communist takeover. So they began actively discussing who would succeed her. In September 1975, U.S. Ambassador Robert C. Hill telegraphed Washington, writing, "There is a power vacuum at the center, and it is not Peron who will fill it. Hence, whether she remains a figurehead president for yet some time, or whether a new government takes over from her, Mrs. Peron is no longer at the center of the equation."
One of the individuals the United States saw at the center of that equation was Videla. They didn't outwardly support him yet, but he seemed like a safe, moderate leader.
Whether the United States realized it at the time or not, Videla was one step ahead of them. He was already plotting to undermine Isabel.
To Videla, his life and military career had led him to this point. He and Argentina had one enemy, Isabel Peron, a cancer festering in the Casa Rosada. Seizing